Hello, Namaskar, and welcome to the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis, and my name is Juggi Bhasin. So yes, definitely the topic for today's podcast is a little enigmatic, and all of you would be wondering that, after all, what is the connection between Kamala Harris and the fortunes of the BJP? I will explain all that a little later in the podcast. But know this. It was not so long ago that President Biden had announced that he would no longer be the Democratic nominee, and he had, in a sense, anointed Kamala Harris to take over the reins from him. And around that time, almost all the opinion polls were showing that President Biden was nowhere near President Trump in terms of popularity. President Trump actually enjoyed a fairly good lead over him. And now in the last 3 or 4 days, ever since Kamala Harris now is stepping up to the role, she's been making speeches thanking President Biden for giving her the chance to become the Democratic nominee, the Democratic candidate for presidentship. She has been making speeches. Two incredible things have happened. The first is that suddenly donors are lining up to fill up the coffers of the Democratic Party. More than $230 million have been raised by the Democratic Party. Donors are coming from all over. And the second thing, which is absolutely astonishing, is that within a matter of days, Kamala Harris is actually in a lead over President Trump. A 2-point lead, but a lead is a lead. And it's almost like a reversal of the situation that has happened, and within a gap of not even 10 days. Incredible. But there are reasons for that. And those reasons hold good for America, and those reasons hold good for India also, especially for the BJP. And I'm going to talk about all that a little later. But let's, as I always do, in my podcast, I build a case step by step, argument by argument. So let me start a little right from the beginning about Kamala Harris. Universally, it was felt that Kamala Harris was not exactly a very successful. She was in the role of a vice president. There were a lot of expectations from her when she became the vice president. But universally it was felt, a lot of people felt that she had not stepped up to the role. She was, in fact, a bit of a misfit in the role. And there were a lot of her attributes people used to make fun on social media. And I'll quickly talk about 2 or 3 of them. One is, of course, her famous cackle, that she has a habit of cackling, or a strange kind of a laugh, which seems very immature. People wouldn't like that, the famous Kamala Harris cackle. The second, of course, being that she was a bit of a non-serious candidate. She could never speak with a degree of depth and maturity and probably intelligence on matters whenever she spoke. That was the second criticism which was leveled at Kamala Harris. The third issue also was, especially in our part of the world, that a lot of people felt that she had a bit of a mixed identity problem. She would become an Indian when she would be talking closed door with Indian donors and other Indian people, but for the rest of the world she had a black identity. So this mixed identity was also perceived to be a problem for her. And then she was a bit of a blundering character. She, whatever assignment, not that many of those assignments was given to her during her vice presidentship, she kind of blundered along them. The most famous being then when she was asked to look after the migrants problem. Nothing much was done about that. And then the other issue being that she really lacked good experience to be even in the role of the vice president, though to a large extent a lot of people accept the fact that the vice president's role is basically ceremonial, and not too many presidents have given their vice presidents important roles. So that used to be the criticism which used to be directed at Kamala Harris. And now, almost by a miracle, this is unbelievable what's happening, But all those negatives has suddenly become positives for Kamala Harris, the new Kamala Harris, which is now we are seeing on the world stage. That famous, for starters, that famous cackle of hers, suddenly has become one of her absolutely endearing qualities. And people are now saying that the cackle actually is a full-throated expression of joy and laughter which she has inherited from her mother. Other people are also attributing to the fact that it is an expressionism of the black identity. When blacks are happy, they laugh, they're overjoyed, they can cackle, they can laugh, they can express their happiness, and that is all she is doing. So suddenly that negative cackle has become like a positive feature of her personality. All the other things, her non-seriousness, the blundering, the lack of good experience, and now a lot of people are saying that the problem actually was not Kamala Harris's problem. The problem actually was Joe Biden's problem. He deliberately did not give her important roles. He did not give her a chance really to come into her own. And now that she's getting the chance, she has stepped on the American stage, on the world stage actually, in a certain sense. Then she's delivering the goods. Suddenly she's packing in a lot of punches. Her speeches are now being heard. They are being appreciated. In fact, one of the statements in one of the opening speeches which she made after kind of thanking Joe Biden for kind of anointing her as a Democratic nominee was that she said that during her time as a litigator, as a lawyer, and she had met all kinds of senior side characters, and she used the phrase that all these characters were the constituency of Donald Trump. That, of course, has delighted the faithful in the Democratic Party ranks. So, in short, what I'm trying to say is that all the negatives of yesterday have suddenly become the positives for Kamala Harris, who's actually unbelievably riding a surge of popularity. In a very interesting and a very similar manner, the same thing actually happened again, not even 2 weeks back, when Donald Trump introduced his vice presidential pick, that is J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance was a man who came from nowhere and won the hearts of millions of people, not only in America, but actually all over the world. The Hillbilly Elegy, his famous book, where this entire story of this young boy who has grown up in a dysfunctional family, but even despite all those drawbacks, despite the poverty, and he manages to get into Yale, into law school, and then he becomes very successful out that. He marries the partner of his dreams, Usha, again a person of Indian origin, who helps him to realize his full potential, what he is. This incredible, it's not a rags to riches story only, it's also a story of aspiration, that if you are determined to be something in life, and no matter from wherever you come from, you can still reach there. This story gladdened the hearts of not only Americans, but millions of people around the world. So great choice again. And again, there is a common feature running in both the Kamala Harris and the J.D. Vance story, and that common feature is, and that's the topic for this podcast today, both are young people. And I will explain the importance of being young to being young in politics. Why does it matter so much? Now I will connect all these dots for you later. Now let's take a look at the two older men on the world stage. The first one which I'm talking about is Donald Trump. Suddenly, what has happened is that, of course, after the assassination attempt, Donald Trump, there was a wave of sympathy for him. Of course, not only in America, but all over the world. Even his detractors said that this has gone too far. All the hateful rhetoric which has been spewed against him in the media, the assassination attempt was really, in a way, a culmination of that entire hate which has been thrown along his way, and one actually felt for him. But now that matter is settling down. The Secret Service chief, as we know, has resigned. That matter is slowly ebbing in the background, and wonder of wonders, what is also happening is suddenly Donald Trump has been left bereft. He no longer has his biggest weapon. And what was his biggest weapon? The biggest weapon which he always used to brandish was that he used to rail, rant, and pillory Joe Biden, the old doddering man taking bad decisions for America, leading America into disaster. That issue is no longer there with Donald Trump. It's gone. And suddenly a new, younger, energetic, a mixed race candidate, that is of course Kamala Harris, now on the scene. And my own feeling is that the Trump camp, the Republicans, actually don't know how to deal with her, how to handle this younger person, because in the past they have been pillorying her, they have been making a lot of racist comments about her, a lot of comments, unpalatable comments. But if they do that now, take it from me that they have already lost the election. You don't even have to wait till November to know that. They face, therefore, a big challenge how to deal with Kamala Harris. But again, coming back to Donald Trump, suddenly what is Trump looking like? As I said, he's bereft of this major issue, and suddenly Trump is looking like an older version of himself, a man who, and all the faults of Trump suddenly are showing up, and he suddenly, he looks like this old man who's left in the fray. He's the only old man left in the fray. Please remember, in a strange way, of course, Kamala Harris is much younger. J.D. Vance is, of course, a young man also. He's the only man left in the ring, as they say. His rhetoric suddenly looks tired, and suddenly his entire racist comments in the past, suddenly that entire inward-looking global approach which he has, suddenly that is now coming in the forefront, and suddenly you also get the feeling that the man is not cosmopolitan enough. That is the old negativity of Donald Trump now is suddenly now coming in the forefront, and maybe that was the reason why Kamala Harris got this 2-point lead in this recent polls, because suddenly I get the feeling as if Donald Trump has been exposed. Joe Biden, his arch enemy, the person from whom he actually used to make mincemeat of, and actually he used to carry a lot of positive attributes in relation to Joe Biden, that issue is no longer there with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is actually looking like Donald Trump, but a little more older, the only old man in the ring, as I am saying, a little more tired, a little more of the same rhetoric, nothing new out there. And then let's come to Mr. Modi. Now, Mr. Modi is certainly not this kind of a character. Mr. Modi still happens to be the most popular leader in the world, no question about it. There is close to reverence in millions of hearts for Mr. Modi in the country. But there is a bit of a problem which I think is developing for the BJP, which I'm not too sure if they even realize about it. I've talked about this in an earlier podcast. But there is now, after this bit of a narrow victory for the BJP in Modi 3.0, it does appear that Mr. Modi, the cabinet, the entire government is looking the same. I'm using these words deliberately of what it was earlier. There is nothing new which one senses out there. And the big problem which I foresee, which is coming from Mr. Modi, is that in a very strange way, the right wing, the real hardcore right wing in this country, does not perceive him to be tough on Hindutva, in terms of not on Hindutva, but tough as not being able to implement Hindutva, as being not being tough on the Muslim minority in the country. He is, by a lot of them, perceive that he is not genuinely right wing, and the left obviously thinks of himself as this great practitioner, this terrible practitioner of Hindutva. They're all their policy, they're all their practices, all their politics is based on that. So in a very strange, ironic way, both sides find fault with him. And then there is that same thing of Mr. Modi, which is there now in Modi 3.0. And the net result is that you look now at a cabinet which looks a little tired, which looks a little old. You look at a political dispensation which looks a little exhausted, I would say. It is, of course, still a very clean-cut administration, no question about that, but it still looks old. The point which I'm making is that the youngness is suddenly has gone missing from Modi 3.0 dispensation. And this is what I'm talking about in my podcast. The central point which I'm making is that in politics, whether it is world politics, whether it is American politics, or whether it is Indian politics, youngness matters. Being young matters. Being energetic, doing bright new things matters. Yes, people also look for stability, they look for maturity, they look for sagacity. All that is absolutely correct. But the importance of being young, the importance of younger leaders, that I think is not only paramount, but that the lack of that now is suddenly starting to look apparent in the BJP. And there was something else which had happened in the election campaign prior to the general elections. If you think about it, then Mr. Modi was playing all kinds of roles, a single person band, literally, as I would say. He was playing the role of the main poll projectionist. He was playing the role of the man who was taking the fight to the enemy camp. He was making all the rallies, all the speeches. He was seen everywhere, and nobody else was seen. No younger people were really seen. It was Mr. Modi all the way, and obviously there was too much of him. I think where things started to go wrong in that particular campaign was when one of the roles which he donned, which I don't know who advised him to do that he was like God's gift to earth. There was even talk that he had been given this kind of extra earthly energy to continue what he had to do. It was like the blessings of God. All that projection was absolutely unnecessary. And the reason for that, I think it happened was because he had donned off practically all the hats in the BJP to carry the poll campaign, and it did not completely work. It worked to an extent, we know that, but it did not completely work. And here's the big interesting take which I have. And suddenly, who is now making the news in the BJP? It's not so much Mr. Modi. It is Yogi. And why is Yogi making the news? Because Yogi is a younger person. Yogi is a person who has, of course, suffered a setback in Uttar Pradesh. But all analysts now feel that he suffered the setback not because of his doing, not because of his lack of energy or because of the efforts he had put in, but because of the politics played by the UP state leadership. That is not, of course, members of his cabinet, but the state leadership, which decided on the party tickets in conjunction with the central leadership. And that is why now, as reports are coming in, that he has been given absolute charge of Uttar Pradesh. But the point which I am making is that he is in the news. He is now seen as a salvation man, even more than Mr. Modi, actually, to a certain extent. The man who can, in the next by-polls, which are not very far away, and then after that, 3 years later, then you have the Uttar Pradesh Assembly elections, and then, of course, a general election. But he is a man who could lead the party to better times. And the central point which I'm making, he's a younger person, he's a dynamic person, he is an energetic person. And even though he had lost a bit during these elections, but he actually has come out in a strange way like a winner. Public sympathy to that extent is with him, especially of the majority community. And that is why I'm emphasizing the role of younger faces, younger people, energetic people in the party, which I think is somehow has gone missing in the BJP of today. So we need to keep these things in mind. The other point we have to remember is, why do younger people matter? The United States, for instance, is certainly not a young population as we are, but even there, the voice of younger people, especially people now who are coming out of colleges, out of universities, people who are educated, their voice really matters. They set the trend. And a lot of these young people, especially when Biden had the reins of power in his hands, they had got disillusioned with him. They had got disillusioned because of all kinds of reasons, probably with the Israel-Palestine conflict, a lot of woke issues. They were quite disillusioned with him. But the biggest primary reason being that he was perceived to be this old, tottering man. How could he lead the party for 4 more years? And these fence-sitters, a lot of them white fence-sitters, probably were making up their mind that they wanted to now, this time again, try give Donald Trump another chance, give the Republicans another chance, if they could deliver the goods, if they could bring back the economy back on rails. And suddenly, with the advent of Kamala Harris, all that has literally in a day changed. All those fence-sitters are perhaps again have made up their mind that they will go along with Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. And that is the other central point which I'm making in this podcast, that the role of fence-sitters, the role of people who really haven't really made up their mind, is very, very critical in elections, both in the US and in India. And fence-sitters, by and large, they would prefer a honest but a younger leadership. And this is what I'm saying, that now in India today, we have a similar situation. We have now a lot of people who are deliberate. There are, of course, there is a co-committed BJP voter. There is probably even the co-committed Congress or the India Alliance voter. But then there are millions of people who are fence-sitters, who will wait till the last, who want to see and judge for themselves. And I'm repeating and re-emphasizing this again and again. Younger people matter out there, because younger people come up with their own brand of new ideas, new zest. Just to give you another example, Macron, that is the French president. Now today he probably is perhaps the most unpopular man in France today. But take your mind back so many years when he first became the president of France. And at that time he was really popular because he was perceived to be this centrist, young person with a new set of ideas, who wasn't really left or right, but a centrist who was going to take France to greater heights. So the point which I'm making, the value of being young, the value of younger people cannot be minimized. And that is why, in the conclusion, I will say that for the life of me, I can't understand that why there are younger people, of course, in the BJP, but why is their role being minimized? Smriti Irani, for instance, all said and done, she might have lost the elections, but she is a wonderful speaker. She's a fiery leader. She is passionate in her views. She should be up there. She should be, and the great advocate for women rights and women causes. Why isn't she being pitchforked right out there in the front to lead the fight against the opposition? Why are people like Smriti Irani not being allowed to? This is just one of the examples. Even somebody like, you might not agree with, let's say, Tejasvi Surya, the Karnataka young leader. But he's a man of ideas. He's a man with a lot of energy. Now, these are the kind of younger people who need to be given a chance to come to the forefront. So that is what I think has gone a little missing in the BJP. And finally, I will leave you on this note that maybe now it is time that the Prime Minister, as I said, takes on more and more the role of a mentor, the role of a kind of philosopher, a guide to a younger leadership. He needs to anoint, he needs to bring in a younger leadership. Perhaps even he needs to now start thinking of that who should succeed him in the next general elections, because that grooming process is going to take place another 4 to 5 years. So all this is a lot of food for thought for the BJP. As I've said before, if you start getting old, then you start resembling, if you don't reinvent, if you don't have younger elements, then you start resembling still waters. And what are still waters? Certainly still waters run very deep, but they're also stagnant. There used to be this very famous saying, which was attributed to Nehru. It was attributed to Indira Gandhi also, that they were like a banyan tree and nothing used to grow under them. I hope that the same thing is not said about Prime Minister Modi. He has been all said and done a boon to this country. His contribution to this country is remarkable, but it is also time now that a younger leader certainly comes into play from the BJP, because that's the only way forward in this ever-changing world, this quicksilver world of politics, whether in India or abroad. And so on this note, I come to the end of this podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this podcast. You like my show, do subscribe to it. Subscription, of course, is completely free. All you have to do is to press on that red button on your screen, subscribe to us, and of course, then you will be privy to these very interesting podcasts with absolutely different idea. Till next time then, cheers and goodbye.